In this video, I want to discuss the comparison and contrast, the specific assignment I gave you, in which I asked you to compare a doctor to something of your choice from a list I gave you. Let's say Y. From S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. You chose Y, and then I said, okay, compare being a doctor to Y. And then I had you write. You wrote your comparison essay. Then I asked you. Now notice I did ask you to compare, right? Then I asked you to take the very same Y now and to write a comparison essay for being a boxer. Well, how Y is similar to a boxer, or doing Y is similar to boxing, or being a Y is similar to being a boxer, that sort of thing, right? But you had to use Y for both, the doctor one and the boxer one. So you wrote two comparison essays, and they were well done, or average done, moderately well, fairly well, very well, according to your skill and time that you put into it. But what was the heart of that essay, of that assignment, and why am I connecting it to the literary theme, assignment? All right. The reason I did this is that it's one of the trickiest things to do, to be able to see and stay away from when you're writing a literary theme, is the moment that you cross over dealing with what is intrinsically in the text. That's on one side, and there's a line, and then you cross over the line and you start interjecting your own experience or application of a system of thought onto the text. You apply a system of thought onto the text that is not necessarily in the text. Okay, that's when a literary theme is going to start becoming weak. And so what I wanted to suggest to you is, that's a lot easier to do than you think. Actually taking a text and then comparing it essentially to some other thing that you feel warrants the comparison, but in fact they're only superficial similarities between the two, and to try to say that there's an essential connection between whatever it is you're saying the text is about and what's in the text itself, when there's not that, is going to produce a weak literary theme that you might not recognize because you think there's actually something there. So let's go back to the doctor and the boxer thing, and what I want you to consider, and we'll do this as far as it allows, okay, is the question: can you be a doctor and a boxer at the same time, in the same sense? And this is partly myth, but let's just take the Hippocratic Oath as a defining quality of a doctor. So I'm trying to, again, for the sake of the example here, and I did talk about this when I introduced the assignment. If the oath that a doctor has to take is somewhere in that oath the notion of I will do no harm to my patient or to people, okay, let's just say that the oath was actually I shall do no harm to people. What does a boxer do in order to win the match? So can the boxer, in the process of winning that match, also claim to be essentially a doctor? Now, again, let's work with this as sort of an artificial analogy, sort of an example. Let's just doctor it up a little bit. We can suppose that, oh, look, he does have an MD, right? But then, does having that actual MD make you a doctor? Again, if you give me the starting points I've introduced, that, actually taking this oath and upholding it is one of the sine qua non for being a doctor. It might not be just sufficient, but you have to have that, to have the heart of a doctor, to have the ethics of a doctor, to have the whole definition of what being a doctor is in place. You have to have that oath. You have to have embraced it, and it has to be obtaining in your life, live and at play in your life. Can then you engage in that boxing arena. And because I know physically we can, you might think yes, you know, but at that moment, is that boxer still a doctor in the full sense? So I don't want to resolve this. This is a question that at the heart of it involves some perennial philosophical questions that they're hard to answer. So, but I think that we've seen enough to realize I'm trying to introduce you here to two contradictory states. And if you're taking Y and saying Y is like this and then Y is like that, and the two things you're comparing it to are contradictions, then one of your comparisons essentially is false by the nature of the contradictions. So what I was trying to get you to walk into I was trying to get you to walk into the state of having written a comparison essay, one out of the two that was actually not good, that actually didn't really hold if the other one held. All right, so at that point, then I can ask you to sit back and say, okay, do you see how you can play around the terms, and you can actually, if you separate it out here, all right, you can make this essay work. If you separate it out here, you can make this other essay work. But because these two posts over here, these two, the boxer and the doctor thing, are contradictory, one of your comparisons is weaker than the other. In fact, it really shouldn't have been allowed. All right. Well, what does that do? Then what does that do for your assignment? And basically, what it does is it makes you realize that in your ingenuity, you worked around something and you applied something, whatever Y was that you picked, to two contradictories. So one of those things you applied it to, be it the doctor or the boxer, would undercut the other one, which tells you that the comparison you made between Y, whatever you picked, and the doctor is a comparison that's not actually in the state of being a doctor. You artificially foisted it upon that. Now, it might actually be there with the boxer one, but if you are trying to say, yes, here's how it is similar to the boxer, and then, oh, here's how it's similar to the doctor, if you're using the same points of similarity there, the same nodes, then over here on this side of things, all right, you actually you forced the comparison to happen. Naturally, it happened over here because indeed, whatever Y was does share some essential similarities with the boxer. But if it does that, those same similarities cannot be applied to the doctor. You can do it artificially, but essentially that would be a mistake. Okay. So what some of you engaged in, I'm hoping all of you did, was artificial application. All right. And you took a notion because you had to. The first one might have been easy to write because you didn't realize you were going to write the contradictory side of it too. But at one point, you had to make an artificial connection happen, in the sense of an incorrect, a not genuinely there similarity happen, because it can't. That same similarity can't be in both of those opposing states. Okay, now what all of you did there in the artificial comparison and contrast assignment that I gave you with the doctor and the boxer thing, it happened, and it was allowed to happen because you actually kind of separated it out into two different places, or two different times, so to speak. The one paper over here and the other. So you separated them out into two papers, okay? But so you got the sense that you could actually accomplish the assignment, right? But I would ask you to consider, hey, which one is it really like? Because it can't be like both in the same senses, right? If those two things are contradictions of each other. So, yet you made it happen. Now, think about your literary theme. You had an idea. And usually this mistake happens when it's more of an allegorical idea. You say, oh, there are elements here that in the progression look like they're progressing a certain way, and then you have a system of thought or an interpretation that looks like it's also progressing that sort of way, and you make it happen, but it's not really in there. Okay, let me give you an example. The Psalms, right? The collection of poetry by King David in the King James Version, or the Bible, the Holy Bible. 150 Psalms written by a king, right, of Israel. Well, someone, it's more like 15 years ago, wrote a book. And in the book, this person claimed that the Psalms themselves, you had to add a certain number to the Psalms. I think you had to add 19 before it. So Psalm 1, for example, would be 01. If you had to count it in terms of two numbers, the tens and the ones digit formation. So it'd be 01, and then you add 19 in front of that, 1901. And this fellow interpreted some major events in the year 1901 to the green tree image and the replacement and the planting and the growth of a righteous nation or something like that. So for Psalm 2, he took 1902 and he interpreted 1902. He took some major events in the year 1902 and he used the second psalm to interpret that. And I think he started all this because in Psalm 48 it talks about Psalm 48 talks about the reestablishment of Israel. The pillars are set back in place of the land, and people are amazed and glad. In the psalm, the nation is glad to be reestablished, to be rejuvenated. All right. So in 1948, Israel actually gained a status as a nation. So the fellow, I guess, 48, 19, let's just add 19 to everything, let's see what happens. And he was stunned. In his mind, it all worked out very well. Now, I don't know what happened actually when he hit 100, because what do you do there? Maybe he went ahead and took Psalm 100 as the year 2000, 20, right, 00. I didn't read the book. I just read part of it, but that's not in the Psalms. That's someone interjecting, applying a notion, an independent notion, and very tenuously so, applying it to a literary. Well, we would say the Psalms are much more than just a literary work, but on its very surface, it's at least that. So he would be taking this exterior mechanism and applying it and saying, now this is in the Psalms, but it's not. It's just a superficial act of comparison, I believe. And so you can take a lot of things, all right, and apply it upon a literary work and say that the application works, but you shouldn't say that it's actually in the work. The structure from a literary theme has to arise from within the work out. All right. This again would be an example of substituting an easier task for a harder one. All right, because the harder one is asking you to actually look at the structure, look at the events, look at the characters, look at the style, look at the surprises, look at the twists, look at the elements in the work first, and use only those elements. Can you see within the collection of those things connections and pairings and structure and parallel material developing? You can't bring stuff from the outside and apply it in. It usually almost never works. It works only in one case. Well, I'm going to say only one, but the major way it works is with the allegory. But there was only one book, I think, that we read that is allegorical, and that would be Pilgrim's Progress. Or true allegory. A lot of work can be viewed as allegorical, but then we have troubles because we need to define that term. But as far as a strict allegory goes, when you actually have a work that is such a work, the author often is careful to give you enough pointers and clues to allow you to interpret the allegory correctly. And this is one reason why the allegories we have from classic to medieval to early modern times are very, very clear. I mean, you have people called Christian in the allegory, or everyman, or you know, things that are just very, very obvious in their connection. So, but other than that, it's very hard to actually bring to watch out and to actually write a sort of comparison and contrast or comparison essay. So I feel like, for example, some of the themes I read were really an elaborate comparison essay of how this book is like life. Okay, or this book or this novel is like marriage, or this book is like a religion. So often that type of approach is not actually in the text. It's a little tricky. All right. I mean, for example, in Rasselas, I think it might be tempting to look at Rasselas and his sister Nicaea as Adam and Eve, right? But then what do you do with Imlac, who follows them out, and Nicaea's helper Pekua? I mean, now where do they fit? So it's something to think about. Literary themes become intrinsically weak when you allow them to simply become a comparison essay between X and Y. X being the book or the thing you read, and Y being whatever it is you're bringing to bear. You've got to stay within the work itself and show that, hey, whether you like it or not, Mr. Reader, there are holes in Rasselas. Or there's walking in Rasselas. Walking is the major mode of travel. Why? Then you establish that, and then you ask yourself why. Why walking as opposed to riding or boating or whatnot? All right. So something to think about, and I would say this is the connection between a literary theme and a comparison essay, but it's a connection I think you should probably avoid.